I ended up sleeping on the floor of the San Francisco airport. I was on food stamps. And then in the last 4.5 years, I've raised more than $10 million and invested in more than 100 companies.
Hey folks, welcome back. This is Hong Kwan from Fund BMC, and we're happy to have Arlan Hamilton here for episode 9. Arlan, thank you very much for taking the time to chat today.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So I want to jump right into it. I think a lot of people know you from Twitter. A lot of people know your story. But for those of us who haven't had the pleasure, can you give me the quick Pearland, Texas to Silicon Valley story?
Yeah. So my name is Arlan Hamilton. I'm the founder of a venture capital fund called Backstage Capital. We invest in underrepresented, underestimated founders who are women, people of color, LGBTQ, just like I am. And I started 5 years ago. I was broke. I had a lot of housing insecurity. I ended up sleeping on the floor of the San Francisco airport. I was on food stamps. And then in the last 4.5 years, I've raised more than $10 million and invested in more than 100 companies with those types of founders. So I was in Pearland, Texas, when I started the story. It was probably 8 or 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was just a very long trip from then to now, and that's why I wrote the book. It's about damn time. I wanted to give all of the insights into how I did it, because a lot of people ask me, like, how did you, okay, you said that, but how did you do it? Right. So I wanted to do like a step-by-step, this is what I did, this is how it could apply to you. It's a very extreme version of a story, but it's there's a lot of things that can apply to a lot of people, especially in your audience of builders.
Yeah, so looking forward to the book dropping. When this podcast drops, it'll be the book launch date. So
Woo!
We can definitely talk about that at the end. You had mentioned that, I think you're now over 130 investments. Can you talk about those first 100 investments? Like, how did you find those people? What were you looking for? What kind of founders are you backing?
So we were industry agnostic on purpose. It started with me by myself for the first half of that. I had spent about 4 years before getting my very first investor in me. I had just spent that researching and looking and talking to companies. So I was researching the market and talking to who would become my customer, really, which is the founder, for several years before I had a dime. So when I did get invested in September 2015, I was ready to start investing. Now I could only invest in a couple of companies for the first few months of that, because I didn't have a ton of money, but I had a lot of companies in a queue. And so at first it was just people that I already knew, that I had been working with for years. And then it was people emailing me. I used to do a weekly office hours that anybody could reach me, because just like you, I wanted it to be different than the status quo. I didn't want it to be, oh, you have to have a warm introduction. You have to already know me. You have to already be part of this sort of network thing. And then that's just, people are just going to fund the same people over and over again. I wanted it to be very accessible. So I would say on Tuesdays or Thursdays, I can't remember which day, I had an open day. You could set up on my calendar 30 minutes to tell me about your company. And that's where a lot of really interesting things would come through. And it wasn't necessarily I was finding all the companies that way, but I was learning a lot about different markets and industries. And it was just a really great way to research. And then I would go out and I would meet companies. I'd go to demo days. I'd go to events before people were doing demo days, because I felt like if I met them at the demo day, it was a little bit too late. A lot of people were going to meet them. So I would just do everything I could. I would do a lot of interviews so that people knew how to reach out to me on email. And I had a bunch of deal flow. I had a lot of companies coming to me, just hundreds and hundreds of companies coming my way. Then over time, when I built out a team, it was part of their groups. They would do a lot of that outreach too. And then eventually, starting in 2018, middle of 2018, we were getting so many inbound requests that it was almost like we had like a 24/7, 365 a day a year application process. Yeah. So we had applications open just all the time. And now it's like we see thousands of companies a year.
Mm. Yeah, because a lot of other funds are doing, or even like the accelerators like 500 YC, they're doing batches at a time.
Yeah.
You're just taking them all
Well,
year.
we actually did a batch last year.
Mhm.
2019, we experimented with an accelerator batch of 4
Okay.
cities, and we did 24 companies after seeing
Wow.
1,900 applications. Because we did the first 100. That's why it's first 100. We call the Backstage 100. That
Mhm.
was like the way I just described.
Yep.
Then 24, because we reached that moment in May of 2018 of
Okay.
100 companies, and it was way ahead of schedule. And we
That's
were
really
like,
fast.
yeah, we're like, what do we do next? Who are we, and what do we want to accomplish next? We could just keep investing in companies, smaller checks, being very early with them and making sure that they have that confidence boost from us.
Mhm.
But what do we want to do? So then we said, you know what? Let's spend the next year or so building out an accelerator to take everything that we learned from these first 100 companies and put it into a more structured way, and they could have each other to work with. And so that's when we came up with the 24 companies. We really enjoyed it, but to be honest, it's just been difficult to fund.
Mhm.
So this year, what we did, what we came into it thinking, okay, we're going to take a year off. We'll go to more cities and learn from more cities, and then we'll come back in 2021 with the accelerator. And so we put together a 12 city tour that we were going to do in May and June, and of course,
Mm.
then March hits and coronavirus changes all those plans
Yeah.
within 72 hours. So what we're doing now is we're just like talking to our audience every single day online and just reaching as many founders as possible and being a resource and being accessible. And we
Yeah.
have office hours that we're still here. Go to backstagecapital.com, contact us or sign up for our newsletter. You can find out more about those office hours.
Mhm.
And we plan on being around for several more years, decades, however
Yeah.
long.
So there's a couple good things that you just said there. One is like this style of, I guess, looking for investments that you've been doing for years now is what we're seeing other funds start to roll out, like these rolling admissions, these online applications, these kind of
Yep.
like everybody's trying to build their audience. The second thing is at the end of the day, like your investors are looking to make money. And the only difference that VCs have is really differentiated deal flow.
Yes.
So can you explain that to people who may not understand how VC works?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't understand how it worked several years ago, and
Mhm.
it was all about learning. Because so everything has been like practical, just common sense to me. That's how
Yeah.
I learned about this. Which is, I was learning in these books and in these podcasts and videos and everything that deal flow is king,
Hmm.
which means that you are only as good as the types of companies and the quality of companies that you have access to. And
Right.
I was just seeing so many companies that were different, and not only the quality of them, but like you said, differentiated. So if 100 different VCs, venture capitalists, investors, whomever, if 100 different VCs can get into a certain deal, it's one thing is that it may only be good on paper, like it may
Hmm.
only be like this glistening type of gold sort of thing, and it may mean that people haven't dug into it good enough or well enough, because they think, oh well, the next person has vetted this, the next
Yep.
person is thinking it's good. So you kind of want to find things early. You want to find things that maybe even people don't get yet, that people
Hmm.
are like, oh, that's a dumb idea. Because who thought that it would be a smart idea to welcome people into your home
Right.
and that people would actually pay for that? Billions of dollars later, that has been proven out. Who thought that it would be a good idea to let people into your cars and to do this and that? So you want to find things different early, and you want to be able to have this because you want to be able to get a good deal. You want
Hmm.
to have a founder or founders kind of respect you and to think of you and to think about you separate from the crowd of investors they can get from someone else,
Yeah.
investment they can get from someone else. Because especially in a company that is doing well, is able to get a lot of investment, like money is money to them. They
Hmm.
may just take the first 10 that say yes, but you want to establish a really interesting relationship with the company so that they will be your first call. At least me, this is how I think about it, so that they will be their first call when something is not going well.
Yeah.
because then you can give your insights, and you can actually be helpful in those moments, and
Yeah.
maybe helps right the ship. And if a founder trusts you to talk to when things are going wrong, they're going to give you better deals. They're going to think of you first when they
Mm-hmm.
have opportunities. They're going to introduce you to other founders that they respect. And they're going to say, I respect this investor. They were there for me when I needed them the most. And so I know about this really good deal that's nobody else knows about. I'm going to put you in first. And
Right.
if they have a second company, they'll come to you. Those types of things are really important over time. A lot of times people, investors, are so interested in making a quick buck that they will just look at what's the thing that can get me the upside right now. What's the easy way of doing this? So the flip side of that is a lot of the decisions that I have made and that Backstage has made over the years seem counterintuitive and seem odd to people. And instead, what I'm doing is looking at this long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying these decisions that don't scale, these decisions that are person to person, will pay off, in my view, over time, and they will pay off big.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I keep telling my kids. Like they try to understand. Like my son wants to be a VC when he grows up, so I'm trying to
Oh,
dissuade him.
wow.
I'm trying to dissuade him as much as possible. But if that's what he wants to do, then like I've told him pretty early on. Like he's like in his teens, um, but I said the only game is the long game,
Yes.
and so it's hard to explain that to a kid who's like 10 or 12. But I think a lot of VCs are really, you know again, I've been in the Valley for 20 years now. It seems to be a lot of very transactional people
Yes.
that want to get in on hot deals. And to your point, hot deals may not be a good deal, right? Just because they're hot doesn't mean they're good. Um,
That's right.
and those people might go away after the next crisis, after the next downturn, or even outside of the Valley. This coronavirus can bring the economy down, and those VCs will go away.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who they're not getting their phone calls answered right now
Mm-hmm.
because they're reaching out to investors they thought had their back,
That's right.
but that was when good times. I mean, I haven't done more phone calls than the last month, because this is when reputations and quality of people, that's when it's made. This is
Yeah.
when you see it. It's like when things are not easy
Right.
and they're not glossy. They're just real. And I mean, I just really respect the people who are sticking by their investments right now.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, I've been a recruiter in the Valley for pretty much 10, 15 years now. This is my busiest time. This is crazy.
Hmm.
Like there's so
Hmm.
many companies having, hardships, thinking about how to, you know, maintain burn or reduce burn. There's tons of people who need help right now. This is really like our time, like, for people in services or people in VC community. This is the value add. This is what you do.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So moving on to the next thing, like I know you have this whole first million initiative, and there's an old joke, just like the first million is the hardest, and then I think
Hmm.
T Boone Pickens goes, "Oh, try the first billion." Um, but what does that mean to you, the first million? Because I think most people, like I grew up in Brooklyn, like the first million when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be a millionaire. Um,
Yeah.
but now
I,
it's
I
like it's
def
not just $1 million, right?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to be a millionaire when I was young too, because it's the same thing. Like it's just you just see sort of grays. You don't see a lot of nuance in things that you
Mm,
want sometimes, and it takes a lot of reality to hit you to understand what things are really worth. I actually started Your First Million podcast because I wanted it to be a little counter to that idea.
mm,
It's not tongue in cheek, just so, but it is a little bit to the left of it. It's just a little bit like your first million is going to catch someone's ear, because if they're like me, for several years of their life, they wanted to make a lot of money.
hmm.
I'm talking to people and saying, once you have your first million, whether it be your dollars, which is most of the time, or even like your first million downloads, fans, viewers, etc., what is that like? And is it what you imagined the whole time? Because a lot of people
Mm,
listening are aspiring for that, towards that. But what is it like once you have it?
right.
And it doesn't have to all be, it's not like I have a certain preconceived notion. I wanted to ask the question of people from all over the world, different backgrounds, different industries. I wanted to say, what is it that we're all trying to attain? What is it like once you're there, once you've seen the mountaintop there?
Mm-hmm.
And have seen so many wonderful stories and takes on it that are superhuman. And I think it takes some of the interviewers off guard too, because I think they think, okay, I'm going to go and talk about money.
Yeah.
I really like talking about money, which is interesting to have that uncomfortable tension at the beginning. And then they start talking and you really get to the humanness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
It just is exceeded my wildest dreams of what I have learned and what has been impacted and people who have been impacted. A lot of people who listen to the podcast, Your First Million, they're like listening to it while they're like working a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And they're commuting or doing something, and these days at home, but working something that is not their $1 million job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting how many people have reached out and said, what this millionaire said to you on that last interview has like resonated with me so deeply, because if you think about it, we're all equal and we all have these common threads.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I remember there used to be like a secret millionaire next door or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a TV show or something like
It's actually still on, and I was
Is
asked
it?
to be on it.
No way.
I haven't told anybody that, but I was
Oh,
asked to be on it like a month ago.
that's
I'm like,
hilarious.
that's crazy.
Yeah. It's like around here, like every neighbor.
Everybody, yeah.
And it doesn't have much value. It doesn't carry much weight anymore.
No, now it's billion. I think the one I was asked to be on was called like Undercover Billionaire.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Is that like
Yeah.
the
And I'm like,
undercover boss one?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
But you have to like, you go live in a place for a month and you go there with like $100 and you have to start a new company and make $1 million, something crazy
Oh
like that.
man.
And they asked me, I was like, I mean, look at my bank account. There's no way I can be on that. And they said, you have to be a billionaire. I'm like, I'm not even close.
Right.
Like,
Right.
silly. Hey, I see your family. I think,
Yeah.
hey.
My kids are back from their walk.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was a kid, it was like, oh, to be a billionaire, like, this is growing up in the 80s in Brooklyn, and that was just an unfathomable number, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to be a millionaire when we have $20, like,
Mm-hmm.
and now my kids are like, oh, whatever, millionaire. Like, how do I make my first billion, right? Like, they already think differently, and we're just one generation removed, right? So I think that's wild. So I got a couple more. I'm going to jump right into a tough question for you, because
okay, go for it.
I think you said that Backstage wants to fund underrepresented, or more importantly, underestimated founders. And I think Fund BMC, the goal is the same. To encourage people to start companies and to do their businesses, whatever, size and scale that they want to hit. But the question that I've received a lot is, when you say you want to back people of color, are Asian Americans considered part of that group?
That's a great question. It's something that we've been talking about since we started. And for me, my answer to that has always been, what do Asian Americans want me to call them? That has, because when I first wrote Dear White Venture Capitalists, it was a blog post in 2015 where I was living at the airport, and I wrote this thing about how you have to start investing in underrepresented founders.
Yep.
I said in that, to treat Black and brown founders like you treat white and Asian founders, and to give us money, right? And I got people writing to me and saying, hey, it's no cakewalk for Asian Americans either. And then I got other Asian Americans writing to me and saying, yeah, you're right. Like, but the prejudice is I'm always considered IT, or I'm always considered good with money, or I'm always considered this. Yeah. I can never be the guy that they invite out for the beer because I'm not in that thing. So there's this whole thing to it. So I said, okay, and I've asked this question so many times, what do you consider yourself a person of color? Because I'm not going to be the one to put the label.
Yep.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do, but I think my experience growing up is different than what I would say most of the Asian founders in the Valley are, because like the Asian American experience is so differentiated, right? Like a lot of what we see and what we hold up are sort of like Chinese Americans or Korean Americans or second generation, where their sons and daughters of professionals who've immigrated here in prior generations. I'm a refugee from Vietnam. Like I was born in Vietnam, and I grew up, on welfare, right? So it's slightly different for me, I think. But I think the question is because, in the Valley, particularly, Asians are basically white adjacent. And I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing necessarily, right? It's how you view it and how you come to it from your background and your experiences.
Yeah.
So for me, particularly, like I want to see more Vietnamese founders, right? Like it seems like a small niche, but our experience in Asia, Asian American experience for Vietnamese Americans are very, very different. Or, other Southeast Asian Americans like Cambodians, Malaysians, like they're very, very different than the mainstream kind of the big three, right? So it's really not just about race, but for me, it's about class and background and kind of privilege too, right? If your parents are both technologists, then you're sort of expected to be a technologist. If you grew up in a household with two doctors, like you're coming at it differently than someone who kind of grew up in, the back of a grocery store, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In our case with the 130 companies, anytime someone has been Asian American, they've also been a woman or LGBTQ. So we haven't had to face the question in real time. It's always been a philosophical question for us. Right. But I'm very open to it. I want to know, I want to see what we do there, and I just think it's interesting. I mean, I talk to people like Justin Kahn and Ellen Powell and Laura Huang, and you're very right though, because, I mean, obviously you are because you're saying it, but you're also right about when I think about who I talk to people who are Korean, Chinese, or Japanese. I don't have a lot of people who are not that.
Yep.
In my circle.
Yeah.
So I mean, also, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I mean, like even when we're looking to fund African Americans, and then you have like these great founders who just came straight, like Nigerian.
Who are African.
Yeah. Like they're like, hold up, I'm not African American.
Right.
Like I'm Nigerian.
That's right.
It's like, okay, you're right. We shouldn't like assume, right? We shouldn't look at them that way. And that's a huge market with great technology. So many, strong founders coming out of there. So I think as the world is becoming more intelligent about it, and as we're really considering people's personal stories, and that's just trying to put them into buckets.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to have a much richer experience from it all. And I think hopefully the goal for both of us is to fund really great founders, regardless of what they look like, where they come from, but just find these people, support them as best we can, and all make a lot of money together.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So I know we got just 5 minutes left. I'll ask you, the last question is, I know you got time for this because it's about damn time. Tell me more about the book and what we can expect to read.
Yeah, the book, I'm just really proud of it. I would imagine you'd imagine I'd say that, right? But it's my first book. It's called It's About Damn Time. You can pick it up at it'saboutdamntime.com. As a hardcover, as a ebook, and as audio, and I actually read the audio, which was really fun to do.
Yeah,
I definitely was taught by books coming into this venture capital space, like people like Brad Feld, who eventually became an investor of mine. But he wrote the Venture Deals 101, and he writes all these amazing books about venture capital. And then there are a lot of these other books that I read that just kind of emboldened me and inspired me. And what I learned, though, is that most of these books were like by white men, and they were my professors from afar without even knowing it. And so I had a couple of reasons I wanted to write this book. One was that I just wanted to do the same thing that I'm doing in venture and in the business publishing space, and just have more representation. And when I started writing it, which was a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, it was even less. Like it was even worse. Like they have gotten really. There's been a lot of forward motion since then, and I'm very proud to be part of that. And the other part of it was like I want to be able to tell you some things that I've gone through. And I don't know many people who have, in less than 5 years, gone from sleeping on the floor of the airport to investing in 130 companies and raising $10 million plus and going through all the things that I've gone through. And I just wanted to kind of, while the memories were fresh and while it was still there, really encapsulate that and pass that on, because I think a lot of it is, believe it or not, very relatable. And that's what I'm hearing from people. So I didn't want to do it if I couldn't be transparent. I didn't want to do it if it was going to sound like anybody else's voice.
Mm.
I wanted it to be something that I was proud of and could be proud of for years to come. And it's just something that was really therapeutic and cathartic to write. I feel like I get to say my piece about a lot of things. And I think that it's absolutely relatable. What I've heard so far from people is that it motivates them. They put it down and they're ready to go and do their thing. And that's all I could have ever dreamed of.
That's great. I think it's really inspiring to hear that. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this book from reading it. And I don't think your goal is to like get people to become VCs necessarily.
No.
But to find their own kind of path, right? To find their own
Yeah.
future and to give them hope to like be able to build something, especially after what's going to happen, like with the economy. We're all going to have to come out of this, be a little bit more resilient, be a little bit stronger,
Yeah.
help each other a little bit more. I think it's going to be a really valuable, would you call it a business book?
It's a business book. Yeah,
Okay.
It's a business book. It's part memoir.
Yeah.
It's absolutely something I wanted people who were starting their own companies or who were working for other people to be able to reference and come back and reference. So it's definitely, that's why it's not a full-on memoir.
Right.
I think the memoir is years away.
Yeah.
This is practical stuff for you to walk away with.
Yeah. Well, as a big reader of business books, I'll just say it's about damn time we got a different point of view, because I'm kind of tired of the same old.
Yeah, thank you so much. You seem like you have a really interesting story yourself. Do you have a book out? Are you going to write one?
I do not. I'm not writing a book. People have told me this, and I just don't. I'm usually the guy behind the scenes. And I think that's another thing with the Asian American story, is that if I go into a pitch, I'll go meet a VC, and they'll say, "Cool, where's the other guy?"
Yeah,
where's the CEO,
hear.
right?
This is what I hear. Exactly.
I'm a history major. I'm not a technologist. I mean, I'm not a CTO, but I know.
Well, if you're a history major, then you understand chronicling information, and that's what you can. Yeah. I think you should write something, even if it's a blog or something, or do a special episode where you, for 30 minutes, tell your story. I think that'd be really fantastic.
Yeah. One of my last guests, she said we should flip the tables and she would interview me. And I said, we'll do that for episode 100.
Perfect. You have a goal at least. Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed myself and I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Again, this is Fun BMC episode 9 with Arlan Hamilton. The book drops on May 5th. Go pick it up.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers.